Blak, they all died in custody.
The death of a young local sparked impassioned.
They can't believe that no one will be charged.
In fact, incarceration is the disadvantaged and unequal position of Aboriginal people.
If I'm going to see justice before I die, they should be accountable for her death.
How many more before we go enough is enough?
Warning. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander viewers are advised that this video may contain images, voices and videos of deceased persons. There may also be words and descriptions that may be culturally sensitive and no longer used.
I need answers. Okay, I know you do. How long do I have to wait for my answers?
There were quite angry scenes here at Parliament House earlier this afternoon when the Premier unexpectedly addressed around 200 protesters upset about a 22-year-old woman dying in police custody.
A stain in our history, the death of Ms Dhu. The 22-year-old was arrested in South Headland over a $3,500 unpaid fine. She was sick, but officers didn't believe her.
While 4 police officers were sanctioned in 2014, they're angry no one was charged.
No accountability. No one's been accounted for. You know? It took someone new, a human life, and no one got accounted for it.
Anger was building following the death of Ms Dhu, with many in the Indigenous community feeling this death could have been prevented if the recommendations from the Royal Commission had been implemented. 3 months after the state coroner delivered her findings into the death of Ms Dhu, the McGowan government won the state election. As the new Attorney General, John Quigley was now the state's most powerful lawmaker. One of the Labor election promises was to change the law which incarcerated the young woman.
We were a backward state in this area because other states had been doing work and development orders like New South Wales. But convincing some of the bureaucracy that this was going to work was the challenge.
These fines used to build up, so they might start at a certain amount and then become, you know, quite high. Really ridiculous, really targeting particularly Indigenous impoverished people.
I think it's a bit of an ingrained attitude in non-Aboriginal people that, you know, we're a group of people to be kept under close watch because we may do something that is untoward or that might jeopardise their freedoms and interests.
3 years after the state coroner had recommended law changes in WA to stop the incarceration for unpaid fines, the McGowan government introduced their fine default reform package.
It is unfortunately the case that a tragedy became the catalyst for these overdue changes.
But it was a tragedy in America that would reignite the calls for change in Western Australia.
The most isolated city in the world, today the stage for the Black Lives Matter movement. Thousands out in force descending upon Perth City, loud, angry and emotional.
We protest for the voices that have been silenced through death in custodies. We stand as a voice for them and the voice is unheard.
The state government was now under enormous pressure to push through promised legislation.
Last year, 436 people were jailed for fine defaults. Already this year, 131 have gone to prison to pay off their debts. 40 of them were Aboriginal, 27 of them women, all of them poor.
It's inhumane, unnecessary, and other jurisdictions have done away with it years ago. I cannot get around the law without passing a new law.
On the move, they marched, they chanted, taking a knee on Barrack Street, in solidarity with a global movement that's transcended the United States.
2 days after Perth's second Black Lives Matter rally, WA Parliament passed the fine default reform package.
It's sad that it took us so long to get to that position. If a person is unable to pay their fine, they are able to immediately apply for alternate measures like a work and development order, and they can work in the community to pay the fine off.
A life-saving law, far too long in the making.
All the reconciliation and all that, new fellas and Premier and that, they promise us black fellas this and promise us that. They will never bring that little daughter back, granddaughter.
I can't sort of give a medical outcome there, but I think she'd be given every chance to be alive. She wouldn't have ended up in a jail cell for one.
It's the colour of your skin. It actually is. If you're a white fella and you're dying of a heart attack, you will get looked after. But if you're an Aboriginal person who is sick in the system, you will die. That's the honest truth.
Even now, there are still a number of recommendations from the Royal Commission yet to be implemented. Activists are asking how many more will suffer before sweeping changes are made to finally stop black deaths in custody.
Protest because I see there's so many injustices with my people, and I've been through the injustice. I just want to keep on fighting to make sure it doesn't happen to more people and stop the deaths in custody rate, so we can all be equal in Australia and we can all live as one.
But what we had hoped had happened is people like my little brother here wouldn't die because the recommendations were implemented. And when we talk about recommendations, they're not implemented into law. Recommendations is just something on a piece of paper that gets filed away somewhere. It doesn't mean nothing to us.
This year alone, there has already been several more black deaths in custody across the country, bringing the national total to 474 since the recommendations were first handed down. The recommendations handed down 30 years ago has given the government a blueprint for the way forward. It's taken decades. Now it's time for action.
The people of this community have become stronger, knowing that we can stand up for something where justice needs to be done. It gives us strength. We no longer feel that we be intimidated,
No one should die in the way that John Pat, Ms Dhu or Mr Ward did.
We have further reforms that we are actively working on now. One of the areas that we've got to look at is how to divert young people at a very early stage of life away from the criminal justice system.
Promote justice reinvestment, actually investing into communities to prevent crime in the first place.
The love of a family, and we will continue to honour his name.
West Australia has so much to be proud of, but our history of treatment of Aboriginal people is not one of them. The time for reports and commission is over. What is needed now is action. Side by side, people from all walks of life are coming together in hopes that finally there will be an end to black deaths in custody.